Welcome to Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery, a conversation held at the intersection of substance abuse, mental health, and everyday living. Your hosts, Mark Regala and Justin Wolf, bring both professional expertise and personal understanding to the table. So welcome to the conversation. Let's dive in.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery. My name is Justin Wolf. I'm your co-host. I'm joined here tonight again by Mark Regala. Mark, how are you doing this evening, buddy?
I'm doing good. Ending
Excellent.
of March, April around the corner. We're starting to turn the corner with the weather. Sun's out a little bit more. Weather's getting a little warmer. Time to do walks by the forest preserve, get those endorphins up, along with the gym in the morning. Life is good.
All right. We got your schedule down.
There you go.
Excellent. Excellent. So if anybody's looking for you, you just gave them the kind of the walkthrough guide. This is how to find Mark.
Why not?
Enjoy. Why not?
I didn't say what forest preserve or what lake though.
Oh, always playing hard to get, Mark. All right. Well, tonight, what we're going to kind of dive into, it just kind of, stays in line with kind of our series, really kind of highlighting and discussing a lot of those mental health challenges that are present while also navigating recovery. And so what we're going to kind of discuss and kind of dive in, I'm kind of excited to kind of hear your feedback, Mark, and your insights into this. When we're diving and talking about depression and substance use and how these two kind of go together, right? Because it just kind of makes sense that these two would become attached. And I know we'll kind of talk about the self-medication hypothesis and really trying to emotionally numb, and we'll really kind of dive into that because that plays a big role. And before we kind of do that, what I thought would be helpful is kind of first describing the differences between what is depression versus like temporary sadness. Because these sometimes kind of get lumped together as one and the same. And when we're talking about depression, we're talking about a persistent low mood with feelings of worthlessness, low energy, low motivation, low feelings of self-worth that have been persistent if we're looking at something like a major depressive disorder for a period of 2 weeks. And that's going to really impact an individual's functioning, their relationships, and just how they're sleeping, they're eating. I mean, it's really impacting every facet of this individual's life. And when we talk about temporary sadness, a lot of times that's a very much a common and a natural reaction to an event that really pulls on those emotions that can be upsetting, frustrating, disappointing, right? You talk about like just what's temporary sadness. A lot of times it's like, hey, like I lost a relationship, so now I feel really bad about this. Or I get passed up for a promotion, I feel bad, right? There's these natural events that we occur where sadness is a normal reaction to the event that's occurring. And so when we're looking at this and we're talking about depression, we can also talk about naturally when we're not feeling good and not really appreciating the emotions that we're experiencing because they're unpleasant, unwanted, and really distressing. We can look at how substance use can come in as a way to try and cope, alleviate, and really numb out that emotional pain that we're experiencing. And it makes sense. If I'm feeling physically not the greatest and I don't like what I'm feeling, I'm going to look externally to try and solve this internal problem that I'm going through. And for a lot of individuals, substance use becomes that solution to the problem of feeling, which leads into a much bigger problem than the initial challenge and struggle when we're talking about sadness and depression and trying to work on how we navigate that terrain. And so, Mark, what I thought would be helpful, man, is like you kind of shine a little light on the idea of the self-medication hypothesis when people aren't feeling good and trying to solve that emotional pain they're carrying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I never quite heard it explained exactly how you just explained it about major depressive disorder versus temporary sadness. And again, I think to the average person that didn't hear that explanation, they're going to think that they're more or less dealing with some type of form of temporary sadness. And why can't I just snap out of this, right? Okay. I mean, that's what I thought was going on. You know, I wasn't diagnosed with major depressive disorder until I was in the weeds of my addiction. I just thought that, there was just some stress going on in life. There was some chaos going on in life. Um, you know, you, it's just life. I mean, you lose grandparents and, you got some stuff going on at home with your kids, maybe the relationships on the rocks with your significant other, your spouse or what have you. Um, it's like, why can't you just snap out of this, even though you feel like absolute crap and have a hard time getting out of bed in the morning and doing your day-to-day activities and concentrating at work, and sleep habits aren't good and diet is absolutely crap, because you're eating basically to feed those emotions. um, but I mean, it makes sense that the addictive behavior, whatever the addiction is, okay, goes hand in hand, with depression disorder, because you feel so blah. I mean, I guess the best way I can explain
Yeah.
it, that you just want to feel normal again. And, we talk about the four feel good chemicals in the brain: the serotonin, the dopamine, the oxytocin, and the endorphin levels. The dopamine specifically is what gives you that euphoric feeling, and I think that your brain works in very interesting ways. Your brain is going to tell you the quickest way to try to fix that deficiency. And a lot of times it leads to um, increased alcohol usage, um, increased drug or substance usage, but also other habits as well. Gambling, hoarding, various sex addictions, shopping addictions, because you're basically getting a high, you're getting a euphoric feeling to kind of get you out of the funk that you're in, to try to make you feel better, to try to pull you out of, the gutter, if you will. And it starts so innocently, and most people don't view it as a form of self medication. They don't even know that they're self medicating because they're not educated on this topic. And then when it becomes a pattern, specifically if you got major depressive disorder and these feelings just don't go away, and you start using your drug of choice, again, whatever it is, on a daily basis to get you to feel normal, okay, to get you to feel like you can be productive and not want to be in bed all day, that's when habits start to occur, and that's when an addictive lifestyle can occur as well. And that's where it can get very, very destructive. And it can get very destructive in a very short amount of time. I don't think people realize how quick it can get so destructive.
Right. Because I mean, like you were highlighting, man, you're kind of like really nailing it on the head when you're talking about your brain is really a problem solving machine. And a lot of these behaviors are really like driven at trying to solve the problem of what we're feeling. Now,
Yeah.
the challenge is that when we're kind of engaging in those behaviors, because like they're very emotionally charged, like my emotion is telling me I need to do this, like I need to isolate, I need to pull away from everybody and everything. And on the flip side of that same coin is my mind telling me, like, I feel so lonely, I feel so disconnected, and I'm really missing out on those relationships that are really important to me, right? So our brain and like the symptoms and what we're trying to like what we're engaging in to provide that temporary relief really creates this vicious cycle that we find ourselves in.
Um, and the thing about it is, without getting too technical, but I mean, if your dopamine levels are supposed to be here, but they're here because of what's going on with your life, whether it's, feeling sad or dealing with the depressive disorder,
Yeah.
your brain is going to tell you to do something to try to get that to that line or above that line.
Yeah.
And when you start drinking or doing drugs or do some type of obsessive behavior to get that euphoric feeling, okay, it's going to get you above that line and make you feel better. But the problem is you're going to have a crash. And now
Right.
instead of your brain making dopamine levels over here, it's down here. And now you got to drink that much more or do that much more drugs to get that euphoric feeling back up.
Mhm.
and then you get the crash. And now your brain is not normal. It's not making the dopamine levels that it wasn't even making before. That wasn't even
Right.
sufficient. And now it's almost to the point where you're like literally you're getting your fix. I mean, you're getting into a pattern where you literally are trying to fix your brain, okay, by chasing a high or a buzz or what have you, just to get those levels up to feeling normal, to get to where they should be. But because of the destructive behavior, even though the thought process was to correct those levels, okay, by drinking or doing drugs, it's actually causing more destructive behavior or more destruction in the brain because now your brain is not even making at the levels that it was making before that was deficient, okay. That's when major depression is going to kick in. That's when major addiction or major alcoholism is going to kick in. And that's a beast to
Yeah.
conquer.
No, you're completely accurate. And as you're talking, man, you're kind of like reminding me of this activity we used to do when I used to oversee like an adolescent dual program. And we were talking about the connection between depression and substance use, right? And how you were gonna like you're gonna look to using as a way to try and lift your mood naturally to feel good. Because us as people, we want to feel good. And we all have like a natural preset that we tend to fall into in terms of like where our mood naturally falls. So it's kind of like this, like you got -5 to 5 here, right? It's just like a nice little math scale for all those that love math. And zero is kind of like, yeah, I'm just kind of good, whatever. So some of us sit at like that 2, 3, which is great, grand. Hey, I'm like feeling pretty good. Things are kind of all right. Or I'm at that like -2, -3, where I'm down more days than I'm not. And
Yeah.
so what you find is like, hey, if I drink, I smoke, I pop, I snort, like all of a sudden, man, that little barrier at that 5 just got blown off. And now I'm feeling great, grand, and wonderful. And then when I come back down, I come crashing back down to the other side, just a little bit lower, right? And as tolerance builds, what ends up happening is like, hey, I use the same amount, but I'm not getting that same euphoria. I'm not feeling as good like you were talking about, Mark. But
I,
that crash and the flip side that isn't told, right? Like this is like the story that using doesn't share with you is that, hey, guess what ends up happening? I blow off that front door, but I also blow off your back door at the same time. So now when you come crashing back down, those feelings of sadness, depression, hopelessness, persistent, suicidal ideation for some people when they experience major depressive disorder are that much stronger and much more present, which creates a whole nother, like you described, a whole nother situation that is now having to be managed and navigated, which is much more difficult than the original. Because what ends up happening is that you keep this pattern going, and now you're using with the intention of just trying to get back to where you started.
yeah. I mean, that's when you talk to most people that are dealing with the major addiction, whether it's heroin or opioid pain pills or even people that are drinking on a regular basis. I mean, they're not even getting a high or getting a buzz. I mean, they're just getting to feel normal.
Yeah.
As I say, they're trying to get their fix. They're just trying to get that brain a little bump in their dopamine levels just to feel somewhat normal to get through the day. Because if
Right.
you don't fix, it's like hell just to try to complete task or go to work or be a parent or what have you. I mean, it's just very difficult to navigate through the day. You have absolutely no motivation whatsoever. And then depending on what you're doing, if you have the whole sickness type thing, whether it's alcohol withdrawals or benzodiazepine withdrawals or opioid withdrawals, now you're dealing with that along with severe depressive disorder and constant urges and cravings because that's your brain telling you basically to feed it because it's
Yeah.
trying to correct itself again. It's it's hell. I mean, it's the best way I can describe it. It's absolutely hell.
Right. And as you're going through that, it's like just imagine the way you're talking to yourself. What are those things that are kind of flying through your mind and the story that's kind of being crafted there? Like it is going to intensify
Yeah,
those feelings and those symptoms. Like, hey, like I don't deserve anything. Like I deserve this pain. I deserve to suffer. I'm no good. Um, right. There's just something inherently wrong with me, and this is
yeah,
what I deserve. And so that, I mean, talk about putting like a barrier in front of your own recovery journey, like that in of itself. I mean, these symptoms, like, because all you want in that moment is just some relief. Like, as you're describing it, as you're talking about it, it's just like, I just need to come up for air and catch my breath because I feel like I'm freaking drowning here
Yeah.
with all these things going on in my world. And that's what, like, just kind of feeds that behavior, feeds the pattern. And where it's like, hey, if I can kind of like get my head, like, it's on a swivel and kind of turn it a little bit to the right and see, hey, maybe there's another path here. Like, that would be incredible. But when something is so emotionally charged in that moment and you feel it, and you're not just thinking, because your body's feeling and carrying this with it, it is that much more difficult to have to navigate, especially when you're feeling like you are on your own island and you have to navigate this all by yourself, and nobody can possibly understand what it is you're going through. And I think that's part of when you look at the situations that people put themselves in. I mean, it's like you talk to them, right? And you're like, hey, like what was going on? Like, you put yourself in this really, really bad position there where you really couldn't win. What was going on? Well, I don't even care what happens to me now. It gets to the point, and I've had this conversation, I think you and I have talked about this too, where you get to the point where you're just kind of like, you know what, when I go to bed, if I don't wake up, so be it.
Yeah.
Right? It's just going to be what it is. And that's fine. This is how I'm going out.
Yeah. I mean, you feel like you're trapped in a prison. You don't see a way out. You look yourself in the mirror and like, how did it get to this point? You got family members that are embarrassed by your behavior and your actions. You're embarrassed by your behavior and your actions. Your employment could be in jeopardy. Your marriage could be in jeopardy. I mean, your entire life is crumbling. And now you got to try to have the discipline to beat it and change your lifestyle and completely uproot everything that you were doing on a daily basis to try to combat everything that you did wrong. It's not easy. That being so, your brain does work in weird ways, because I will tell you, when I was in the depths of my hell, I thought it was impossible. I really did. I thought it was impossible. I thought it was an impossible task. I thought it was going to be so daunting. I did not see a way out. And then, you start going to meetings and you hear similar stories of what you're going through right now, of what people are sharing with you, where they came from. And now you're seeing the after effects of them making the changes and living a life of recovery and so forth. And it does provide hope and inspiration. And I think that's what we do, or which we try to do, with these podcasts and running these support groups and so forth, because I think sometimes you just need, or at least I needed, just some little hope and inspiration that it can be done, some little motivation that it can be done. Because when you're in it and you got a circle that's in it as well, more often than not, you're not hearing stories of success. You're hearing stories of people taking their own lives or dying by overdose.
Right.
And when you do get that hope and inspiration, and you get that mentor that's huge, and then you start making little changes. And as big of a task as I thought it was, and as daunting as I thought it was, I made it to be a monster, and it was not like that.
Yeah.
It was not like that at all. It was still hard. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to mix my words here. It's the hardest thing I've ever done to get into recovery, to get sober, to go through the withdrawals and all that stuff that I had to go through. And get my brain straight, by making major corrections, to my diet and my daily regimen and so forth. So, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it was easy, but it was not as hard as I was making it out to be in my brain, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Because in those moments, your brain is thinking in like absolutes, like these, like it's the most overwhelming thing I've ever experienced, and there is no
Yeah.
way. As opposed to saying, "Hey, this is going to be difficult, and I have the ability to kind of overcome this and move forward." Right? And I think that's part of the challenge, because when you're kind of talking about like changes you had to make, things you had to put in place in your own personal life that set you up to navigate this and manage it, and not to feel like the weight of the world was still riding on your shoulders. You talked about, hey, in other podcasts, and even just there, you kind of mentioned it, right? Like physically having to really talk about the way in which you were attending to your body because a lot of times when we talk about depression and using like that, it gets neglected. We don't take care of it, or we feel disgusted in our skin. So we look at ways to try and get away from it.
Yeah.
Or you look at the impact of trauma on the body, right? Like my body feels foreign to me. I feel like it's not my own because of what somebody else did to me. And therefore, I'm doing everything I can to get away from it.
Yeah.
You look emotionally, right? Like emotionally, actually acknowledging what it is that you're feeling. Instead of running from what you're experiencing, you're turning towards it and acknowledging it and really seeing it for what it is, with what you just really kind of highlighted there, and really acknowledging that mood and that symptoms and those behaviors as for what they are versus what your mind is saying they are. And then looking at that social aspect, because that's something that takes a huge hit when we're talking about like depression, where it's like, hey, that isolation, that disconnection, and who can I now kind of really align myself with and start really attending to these relationships to help pull me out of my own personal hell that I put myself in. So what was the
Yeah.
work you did there, man?
It's like, and I know we've talked about this before. It's you start making little changes. I mean, you're not doing everything at once. Okay, maybe you prioritize. For me, it was really getting the diet cleaned up, getting active in the gym, and then start going to meetings. I mean, that was important. And then obviously, keep my visits with my therapist and so forth. And just things start to morph, man. I mean, it's the best way I can explain it. By doing the right thing, things start to morph and things start to happen.
Yeah,
It's no different than the party culture. You start drinking, you get introduced to this substance or that substance or this substance, right? Well, we're not partying anymore. You're trying to get your brain straight. You're trying to get your body straight. So now it's a completely different culture. Now you're introduced to this particular exercise or this particular regimen, or maybe you should try this with your diet and go high protein, go low carb, or try track your micros and your macros and all that stuff. I mean, it's a complete morphing of the circle that's around you, but it completely morphs because again, you're doing the right thing.
yeah,
Um, I can't stress that enough. If you're going to focus on the task of changing everything, it's going to screw with your brain, and you're going to
no,
think it's impossible to do. You just have to make little changes, okay? And those little changes will start adapting to more major changes to the point where literally it morphs, where literally your entire daily routine is is completely changed up. I mean, I look at the life that I was living when I was dealing with major depression and addiction. It like sickens me right now.
mhm,
Like, I mean, I was drinking 8 to 10 Diet Pepsis a day. I mean, I was drinking initially beer, then it switched to vodka at night, popping a ridiculous amount of pain pills. I'm not even going to talk about the quantities that I was taking on a daily basis. And in between all that, I'm, eating Whoppers and crave cases at White Castles and onion rings. And I mean, the exact opposite of what I should have been doing, I was doing.
right,
And then now you look at things right now, and it's just, I mean, I haven't had a pop, a Diet Pepsi. I don't even know how long. I drink water, I drink protein shakes. Obviously, I've been void off of alcohol, mind altering substances for almost 5 years. I eat clean. I can't remember last time I had fast food. My idea of fast food is like a Subway chicken sub. You go into the gym, you go into meetings. You got a group now of all people that got similar lifestyles to you. You meet some wonderful people through NAMI. You meet some wonderful people through AA. I mean, it's a complete change,
yeah,
but it didn't happen overnight. It happened because you were doing the right thing and making steps in the right direction over a period of time. And that's what allows you to heal and get into recovery and get into sobriety and live a life of recovery and sobriety.
yeah. No, I think that's beautifully said, because I think you're really highlighting one of those really important tenets of recovery where it's kind of making the flip from instant gratification
Yeah,
to like that delayed satisfaction, in the sense of I'm really crafting and building a life for myself that is worth living and getting out of bed for in the morning.
yeah,
And that kind of comes from the work and that persistence and really the intentionality behind what you're doing and what you're really kind of sharing there, which is a huge flip.
yeah.
Now,
And you have to with the dopamine. You have to feel a little bit of a sense of accomplishment, So, I mean, setting small goals, focusing on positives throughout the course of the day, making you feel good about yourself is going to give you a feeling of euphoria, to naturally change the dopamine levels in your brain. Um, Sunlight, going on walks in nature, listening to music, the right music, I would add. A dietary component, a very high protein diet, that'll naturally increase those levels in dopamine and get them to where it needs to be. The issue is that that takes time, And again, you mentioned this just a couple seconds ago. We're a society of instant gratification, and our body wants instant gratification. So it was a lot easier to go to a friggin' tavern and drink beer or drink vodka and get that instant gratification than have to make these changes over a period of time to get the levels to where they need to be. That being said, once you naturally get the levels to where they need to be, you're going to be a much stronger person, one physically and two mentally, because now those levels are up naturally and you're going to be able to withstand the ups and downs of life a heck of a lot better, and you're more equipped to withstand them than you were at any other time in your life. Because trust me when I tell you, there's my life is full of peaks and valleys even today. A lot of stress going on in my life. And the old Mark, with everything I've dealt with, let's just say in the last year, wouldn't have responded very well. The new Mark, live in the moment, don't get too aggressive with the thoughts, worrying about tomorrow, worrying about next week, control the controllables, one day at a time. Let's hit the gym hard in the morning. Let's listen to the right music. Let's eat a clean diet. Let's have a good day at work. Let's live a life of service and help others at night. Real simple.
Definitely. I mean, finding those mantras that really kind of keep you on the path that you want to kind of keep yourself on to keep it working.
Yep.
So, Mark, no, I've really enjoyed our conversation today, really kind of highlighting the connection here between depression and where that can kind of lead us towards when we look at that self-medication by looking at substances to try and solve that emotional pain. Before we get out of here tonight, is there anything else you'd like to kind of throw out there or add?
No. Again, just looking forward to the nicer weather. Spring is in the air, and looking forward to the summer. It's kind of hard to believe. It's not too far away now, and we're at the light of the end of the tunnel with the nicer weather ahead, and I cannot wait for that because it's been a long winter.
Yes, sir. Well, as always, I appreciate everybody joining us on these podcasts. They air on the 1st and the 15th of each month, so feel free to tune in. And Mark, until our next conversation, sir, you take care of yourself, and I will catch you on our next episode.
Yep, for sure. Take care.
Thanks for joining us today on Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery. If you're on the journey to find guidance and insights, subscribe now wherever you find your podcasts. Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery is an educational resource, not a substitute for medical or therapeutic advice. The opinions expressed by the hosts and their guests are not necessarily those of NAMI DuPage. Go to namidupage.org/podcast for links to past episodes, show notes, and to submit a question or topic ideas for a future episode. Until next time, be well.